She spent her career on her knees at crime scenes. Not metaphorically, literally on her knees, with brushes, with cameras, with oblique lighting rigs coaxing evidence out of surfaces that looked like nothing to everyone else. She was a special agent on the FBI's evidence response team, one of the most elite forensic units in the country. She was not a detective. She was not a profiler. She was the person who processed the scene after the detectives cleared the tape. She was trained to see what other investigators missed. And when the drone footage from Nancy Guthrie's property was released, footage that had this entire community pausing and rewinding and watching frame by frame, she did what she was trained to do. She looked at the driveway, not the back gate, not the front door, not the windows or the flower pots or the door frame, the driveway. And what she found, or rather what she did not find, is a question that has been sitting in the public record of this case since day 67 without receiving anywhere near the attention it deserves. She identified the circle driveway at the front of Nancy Guthrie's property as the location where she believes the vehicle that transported Nancy was staged. She explained exactly why that specific surface, decomposed granite, creates one of the most technically demanding evidence recovery problems in forensic science. And she noted on the record that she did not see in the publicly available drone footage evidence that anyone was conducting the systematic tire impression work that surface warranted. Tonight we are going to walk through exactly what she said, exactly what it means, and exactly what was potentially sitting in that decomposed granite driveway in the first hours of this investigation that may or may not have been recovered before the window closed. Hit that like button right now. Share this video immediately because this is a forensic detail from a named credential practitioner that this community needs to fully understand. Subscribe to Black Veil Crime Files with notifications on because we track every confirmed development in this case all the way down to the technical evidence that other coverage overlooks. And stay until the very last second because the DNA from the black glove and what the FBI's cellular analysis team is almost certainly already processing brings everything in this video into direct focus. Let us start with who she is. Who is the forensic agent?
Was the initial plan to pull the car around back and then they had to abort mission and the driver came up on the circle driveway instead and then they went out the front door? Part of the plan was to remove Nancy via the front door.
And why her assessment carries weight. The FBI's evidence response team, the ERT, is the Bureau's dedicated forensic unit. These are the agents called in.
O'Connell.
The very first thing I looked at was I was looking for tire impressions on the driveway. I only saw one set from the moment that drone went up.
For the most complex, the most sensitive, the highest stakes crime scene processing in the country. Presidential events, mass casualty incidents, federal crimes where the evidence is so critical, so fragile, so contested that a procedural error at the scene is not just an embarrassment. It is a case-ending failure. ERT agents undergo specialized training covering blood spatter analysis, digital forensics, latent print recovery, and trace evidence collection. And within that world, tire impression analysis is not a footnote. It is a core discipline. ERT agents are trained to find, photograph, preserve, cast, and analyze tire impressions in conditions ranging from the straightforward to the deeply complicated. This forensic agent was not offering an informal take to a friendly audience. She was a practitioner offering a professional forensic assessment to a reporter, on the record by name, about a real ongoing missing persons case. That distinction matters enormously, and it is the reason her observations deserve to be treated with the seriousness they carry. The very first thing she looked at in the drone footage was tire impressions on the driveway. She saw only one set. And what that observation led to is the foundation of everything that follows. The circle driveway and why it matters operationally. Nancy Guthrie's home has what is commonly called a circle driveway. A curved looping driveway at the front of the property that allows a vehicle to pull in, loop around, and exit without reversing. In most circumstances, it is simply a practical feature common to properties of this type in the American Southwest. But think about it from a different angle entirely. A circle driveway is designed for convenience, but it is also, from a purely tactical standpoint, designed for a quick exit. You pull in, you do what you need to do, you leave. You do not back out into traffic. You do not reverse down a residential street where someone might see you. You do not make a three-point turn in the dark in front of a neighbor's security camera. You leave forward-facing at speed the moment you decide you want to leave, with full visibility forward, with no awkward maneuvering to execute. If someone was planning to remove Nancy Guthrie from her home quickly, quietly, against her will, in a way that minimized the time a vehicle spent in a compromised position on a residential street, a circle driveway is exactly where you would want to stage that vehicle. Pull in, load, roll forward, gone. The forensic agent told the reporter directly. The circle driveway is where she believes the vehicle that transported Nancy was positioned. And she offered a specific reason why the original plan may have changed from a rear exit to a front exit. The neighbor's dog. Dogs bark at unfamiliar people. Dogs bark at unfamiliar vehicles that do not belong. They bark at unusual sounds and smells and presences that are out of the ordinary pattern of a quiet residential neighborhood. The forensic agent's professional read is that something, possibly the dog reacting to activity at the rear of the property, possibly another unanticipated development, caused the people involved to change their plan. The original rear exit was disrupted. The vehicle moved to the front, and the exit happened through the circle driveway, potentially leaving tire impressions in the decomposed granite surface. Was the initial plan to pull the car around back? Then they had to abort, and the driver came up on the circle driveway instead, and they went out the front door. Part of the plan was to remove Nancy via the front door. Decomposed granite, the surface that changes everything. Here is where this becomes technically critical. And this is the part of the forensic agent's analysis that has been almost entirely absent from the broader coverage of this case. Nancy Guthrie's driveway is not concrete, not asphalt, not pavers or any sealed hard surface. It is composed of decomposed granite. And that specific surface material is everything for understanding the evidence problem being raised. Decomposed granite, commonly called DG, is a naturally occurring material formed when granite rock weathers and breaks down over time into a loose granular aggregate. It is extraordinarily common in desert landscaping across the American Southwest. In Tucson, in Phoenix, in Scottsdale, in Albuquerque, it handles the heat, it is permeable to rainfall, it requires minimal maintenance, and it looks appropriate and natural in a desert environment. Hundreds of thousands of properties in Arizona use it as a primary surface material. Forensically, however, decomposed granite presents very specific and very significant problems for evidence recovery. The core issue is this: DG is not fixed. It is a loose, shifting, granular material. It compacts under pressure, under a vehicle's tires, under foot traffic. But that compaction is not permanent and it is easily disrupted. When a vehicle drives over decomposed granite, it does leave a tire impression. The weight of the vehicle presses down on the granules, creating a pattern that corresponds to the tire's contact surface. But unlike an impression in wet soil or mud or clay, that impression in DG is fragile, can be disturbed by subsequent foot traffic, can be shifted by another vehicle crossing the same area, can be broken down by wind. And in a desert environment where wind is a regular presence, the window for recovering that impression before it degrades is not generous. There is also the issue of visual complexity. Decomposed granite has a naturally irregular surface texture. It does not look like smooth mud where a tire impression stands out clearly to the naked eye. The impression exists. The compaction pattern is there. But it can be nearly invisible without the right conditions and the right equipment. Oblique lighting and why standard photography fails on this surface. Tire impressions in decomposed granite do not photograph the way tire impressions in mud or soil do. You cannot walk up to a driveway, point a camera at the ground in normal daylight, and capture an image that is forensically useful. The surface does not work that way under standard lighting conditions. The key technique the forensic agent referenced is oblique lighting. Oblique lighting means positioning a light source at a very low angle relative to the surface you are photographing, almost parallel to it, raking across it so that the light creates shadows in any depressions or raised areas in the surface. When you do this, features that are completely invisible under normal overhead or ambient light suddenly become visible. The shadows they cast under the raking light create contrast that the camera can capture. You have likely experienced this principle in everyday life without thinking about it forensically. If you have ever tried to see footprints in a carpet by holding a flashlight parallel to the floor, you have used oblique lighting. The footprints that were invisible in normal room light become clearly visible the moment you get that light source low and let it rake across the pile. The same principle applies to tire impressions in granular surfaces. The light at a low angle creates shadows. The shadows create contrast. The contrast reveals the impression. Without oblique lighting or an equivalent technique, tire impressions in decomposed granite are extremely difficult or impossible to photograph in a way that produces results that are forensically useful and legally defensible. And photographing the impression correctly is only the beginning. You also need calibrated measurement scales placed in the frame at the same plane as the impression before investigators themselves create new impressions on the surface they are trying to recover. Those small rulers you see placed next to fingerprints in crime scene photographs. ERT agents use long versions of the same thing for tire impressions. Every forensic photograph of an impression must include scale to be measurable, comparable, and admissible as evidence. This is the technical standard against which the forensic agent assessed what she saw and did not see in the publicly available drone footage from Nancy Guthrie's property. What she saw in the footage, and what she did not. The forensic agent watched the drone footage the way she was trained. Not looking at what was dramatic or immediately visible, but looking at what investigative processes were visible on the scene. Specifically, whether investigators were conducting the kind of careful, systematic, technique-specific evidence collection on the driveway surface that the situation warranted. She did not see in the available footage evidence that anyone was working tire impressions in the circle driveway. No oblique lighting equipment visible. No technicians on their knees at ground level with scales and cameras positioned for impression photography. No systematic documentation of the front driveway surface. No visible activity centered on the decomposed granite circle driveway that corresponded to the kind of impression recovery work she would expect to see on a scene with this profile. Now here is where her intellectual honesty becomes important to register. She was careful about this observation. She acknowledged explicitly that the FBI may have conducted that work at a time when the drone was not overhead. In the early morning hours before media presence arrived. During a period of scene access not captured in publicly available footage. She cannot know from the outside of an investigation whether that work happened. She was fair about the limits of what the available evidence allowed her to conclude. But she did not see it. And that absence, the absence of visible tire impression work in the circle driveway in the footage available to the public, is what has been sitting with her since day 67. An experienced ERT agent looking at a scene, looking for the forensic work that should be visible if the scene was processed as thoroughly as the situation warranted, and not being able to confirm it happened. That is the observation she put on the record. The glove, the DNA, and the net that is tightening. Everything the forensic agent identified about the circle driveway connects directly to the broader forensic picture that has been building in this investigation. A black glove was found in a field approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home. The FBI confirmed it appears to visually match the type of gloves the masked suspect was wearing in the doorbell camera footage from the night Nancy disappeared. The glove was sent to a private forensic laboratory, and the preliminary results confirmed the glove contains the DNA of an unknown male. Someone who is not Nancy Guthrie and is not anyone close to her. The FBI then entered that profile into CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, a database that searches continuously for matches against every profile of every person who has ever been arrested for a qualifying offense, convicted of a felony, or required to submit a DNA sample in any state. If this person has ever been in the criminal justice system anywhere in America, CODIS either already has their profile or it will surface it. If they have not, there is a backup that this community understands well. Forensic genetic genealogy. The same technology that identified the Golden State Killer after more than 40 years. Investigators build family trees from partial DNA matches in consumer ancestry databases. They work backward through generations. They narrow from a family to a branch to a specific individual. That process takes months, not years, when it works. And the FBI's forensic genealogy capability is among the most sophisticated in the world. Both tracks are running simultaneously right now. CODIS searching. Genetic genealogy standing by. One of them is going to produce a name. And while that runs, The FBI's cellular analysis team is almost certainly processing cell tower data from the area around Nancy's home between midnight and 4 in the morning on February 1st. Every cell phone active near that property during that window was logged by nearby towers. If the people involved were carrying phones, and most people are physically incapable of leaving their phone behind, the Bureau has already built a movement map of every device present in that neighborhood that night. Investigators have likely surfaced names that have been evaluated. Some cleared, others potentially still in play in ways the public cannot see. That is the reality of where this investigation stands. What the public sees, the press conferences, the statements, the warrants, is a fraction of what is actually in motion. The forensic work happening below the surface of official communications is built from tools and data sources and analytical capabilities that most people do not know exist. The circle driveway, the decomposed granite, the tire impression that may or may not have been recovered before the window closed, the glove and its DNA, the cell tower data and the movement maps being built from it. All of it is part of the same picture. A picture of what happened on a quiet residential street in Tucson in the early hours of February 1st to an 84-year-old woman whose family has been waiting for 67 days and counting. Nancy Guthrie has not been found. The investigation is ongoing. A reward of $1 million remains active. If you have any information, please contact the FBI directly or submit a tip at tips.fbi.gov. You can remain completely anonymous. Leave a comment below right now and tell me what you think about the circle driveway theory. Does the operational logic of a front exit make sense to you given what we know about the rear of that property? What do you think happened when the original plan changed? And what does the DNA on that glove tell you about how close investigators actually are? Subscribe to Black Veil Crime Files with notifications on. Share this video immediately. The forensic details in this case matter, and this community is the reason they stay visible. This is Black Veil Crime Files. I will see you in the next one. Black Heart.